Oh, hey! Hey there, how are you? You caught me on the virtual set again. I'm Jacob Israel. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the show. I just get a little bummed out when I look at some of the headlines. A lot of the things that I've been reading from the, with the bees. Everybody's talking about the bees. The bees are dying. They're dying in record numbers. The bees, they're dying everywhere. This is a big deal. I think it was Albert Einstein that said once the bees go, so does our food. They pollinate like 1 out of every 3 of the foods that we eat. It's a big deal. And they just approved in the United States some pesticide. Yeah, bee-killing pesticide. They approved it. At the same time, oh, good grief, the administration said, we don't need to track the loss of the bees anymore. We don't need to worry about that. No big deal. Don't worry about the bees are dying everywhere. After the earthquake, there were viral videos about all the bees all over the place. So you get a little bummed out about that. You get bummed out about all the earthquakes you hear about. You get bummed out about all the war and the rumors of wars. You get bummed out about all the stuff that you're hearing. But I got good news for you today. I'm excited about one of the things that I saw, one of the things that I stumbled upon, a biblical, prophetic sign, some people might say. A recent discovery, much like many of the discoveries that they've had so far. We've had a lot of discoveries. Had the Gate of David. That one was discovered just recently. In fact, a lot of the videos that I do are on things that are discovered. Ancient biblical places or things or events that come to the surface. And one just came to the surface in a mighty big way. The biblical city that harbored David when he was on the run from King Saul. Ziklag. Town in Gath, better known for Gath would be where Goliath. Remember I did a video on David and Goliath? Gath was where Goliath was from. The Philistines. Very, very symbolic place. All those giants that we talk about, the fallen angels, the Nephilim, right? A lot of people are very interested in that stuff. Well, Gath was the place where they all were. Gath was known for its citizenship of giants. The ancient city of Ziklag, the Philistine city, has been discovered. And this is actually big news for you and me. This is very symbolic and very telling of what's to come. Archaeologists in southern Israel have discovered an ancient biblical city from the time of King David. The site was discovered near the modern city of Kiryat Gat by researchers from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Macleod University in Australia, and Israel Antiquities Authority. Now this is why it's a big deal. Ziklag was the place where David camped out. Ziklag was the place of refuge for David, while King Saul was seeking to put him to death. I actually even toyed around with the idea of naming this the Throne of David Restored, because that's sort of what I see happening. And let me explain. You see, a lot of these stories that we find in the Bible, David's story being one of them, it's our story as well. You're meant to see parallels. They all have this similar theme. David's story is also Christ's story, if you will, which is also your story and my story. So let me tell you a little bit about who Saul is and who David is, okay? So Israel, God's chosen people, they had a problem just trusting in God. You know, they didn't want to do what Moses did. They didn't want to do what other people did. So they wanted a king. They wanted someone to rule over them. So they told the prophet, and the prophet went and got Saul, that was Samuel, and they made him king. And, God kind of warned him, said, look, once you do this, they're going to take 10% of your wages, and they're going to send your men off to war, and they're going to have your women do meaningless things. And it's sort of symbolic, and it's also a very great picture of the religious system. Like God wants you to have a relationship. He wants to have a relationship with you intimately, and you're like, no, just tell the pastor, just tell the rabbi, just tell the imam. I'll get the news on Sunday. I don't want to put in the work. And the God's like, all right, fine. You're going to tithe. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Blah blah blah. So Saul, which, by the way, I don't think is just an allegory. I believe there was a King Saul. I believe there was a literal King David. This is interesting because just recently, there were so many discoveries about the gate of David, and also the fact that the biblical king, they now say, may have existed. So this is a big deal. So Israel says, make us a king. Saul becomes the king, right? Problem is, Saul's not that strong. And this is where David comes into the picture. Saul really wasn't the best guy, right? Spiritually speaking, he kind of trusted a lot more in his ego. And God, because of it, sent a tormenting spirit. David was known to be this harpist, right? Saul was like, he was tormented at night. He was always bummed out. And this is how David comes into the picture, this shepherd, who, by the way, God anointed as king because Saul had turned his back on the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. He turned his back on him. He didn't wait for God's instruction. He did exactly what he wanted to do. So God's like, I'm taking the kingdom from you. I'm going to give it to somebody else. And he ends up giving it to this young punk shepherd named David. He was kind of a measly dude who was the smallest of a bunch of brothers who were a lot more important, a lot bigger. They were all the children of Jesse. David was the shepherd. But what he did to kill the time is he played an instrument. He played an instrument. He played the harp. He wasn't a recorder like me. He was one-handed, by the way. He played he was basically like a harp. Okay, it was like a harp, and he was so good at it that Saul, because he was having such bad dreams and he was feeling so bad all the time, he couldn't get to sleep. They bring him before him, and he plays the harp. Now, this is where David's story begins. Young kid, right? Anointed to be king. Long before he ends up being king. My goodness, I think it took something like 40 years before he became king. So one day the Philistine army comes, right? And they're facing King Saul and his army. And they got this one big giant. They got this giant from Gath, right? See, this is where it all comes together again. The giant's name was Goliath. That's what the headlines are saying, that the city of Ziklag, from where Goliath was from, that I was just discovered. Goliath was this huge giant. I talked about it. David, right? He with a slingshot kills Goliath, and ends up, we cut to a little bit later in his life, he's hanging out with Saul. He's great. He's conquering and everything else. And Saul gets more powerful. Israel gets bigger. David becomes the head guy in the army, and everybody's singing. Saul kills his thousands, but David kills his 10,000s. Saul got a little jealous. And then Saul caught on to the fact that possibly God was going to take the kingdom from him. He knew it was going to be taken from him and then give it to David. So what does he do? Off with his head. He wants David dead. So David's on the run. So this is the point in time where David's on the run from Saul. I connect with this story some because I worked for Christian TV, right? When I first got there, they loved me. They were like, oh, Jacob, you're the best. They actually even did a little movie about me coming, and it was a whole beautiful thing, and I felt very honored. But in the background, because I knew that I wasn't like them, I knew that I was anointed to do something too, if you will, like doing these videos right here for God, because I'm so seriously spiritual and wonderful and everything else. I felt a little bit like David too, where everybody was singing my praises, and I thought, how long is it gonna be? How long is it gonna be before King Saul, the religious system, comes after good old Jacob? So Much like David flew, I flew. I flew Christian television, and I came to this place where I am right now, the place that the Lord has given me, where I spend many, many hours, working, doing my thing, but seeking and understanding and starting to see a better day. My Ziklag, if you will, which has been discovered. Now you got to understand, at this point of the story, right, this is where Saul, the system, the religious system, or you want to call it the beast system, where it starts to lose its influence, its power. When David's on the run, he's got no problem. He ends up going to the king of the Philistines, right? The one-time enemy. He goes to the king. And ironically, the king's name, it means just a man. And he was the son of Maok, whose name means oppression. It's interesting, symbolic, that he goes to work for the Philistines, who, by the way, immigrants, mind you, which is what this census has become all the rage about, right? The census going on with Trump right now. The census takes place every 10 years or so. 2020 census. What's interesting about that was I had my eye on that too. David, King David, was also known for a census. God wasn't too thrilled about that census. But you know who else was all about censuses? The people that wanted to kill Jesus when he was born, right? Remember the slaughter of the innocents? That was based on a census. They were looking for the immigrants. They were looking for Christ. The one that is said to be king. The one that the system said, oh no, we got to get that guy and kill him. Just like Saul trying to kill David, the system tried to kill Jesus. Everyone under the age of 2 years of age from that event in the stars, that Bethlehem moment that brought all the shepherds around, right? That moment in the stars, much like the one we had, about 2 years ago. September 23rd, 2017. I think it's interesting that in the land, a census is being taken again. Remember I told you that there was going to be something, it was going to be birthed. It was going to be birthed. But like anything else, when you're young, when you're proud, when you're anointed to be king, right off the bat, you're weak. You're like David. You're just like David, playing your little instrument, right? Working for the man. Knowing in your heart that God called you for more, knowing in your heart that you're destined for more, knowing in your heart that you're meant to rule and reign with Christ, and that one day your moment is going to come. But that may not be today. That may not be tomorrow. And while we're worried about earthquakes, and we're worried about wars, and we're worried about all of this stuff, and we're worried about the food supply, we're worried about all this stuff, and a census is being taken at the same time that Ziklag is discovered. Among other things that were discovered, Ziklag being the place of refuge. This is the place that David hung out in. And you know what happens next? Do you know what happens next in the story? You don't? Saul ends up losing. He loses the kingdom. And David gains and gains and gains. So David made a deal with the Philistine king, Achish. And Achish, who loved the dude, right? And Achish said to him, he goes, look, David, you're a tough dude, right? You're a tough dude with your 600 men. David had 600 men. It's the number of man. So the king says to David, look, will you take your 600 men? Ironically, 600. It's interesting, right? It's sort of like when I was working for Christian TV, and then I left. It's kind of like I came to, and now I'm on YouTube, what they would consider to be more of the Philistines, kind of the enemy of God, right? And yet, it seems like the Philistines, they were okay. They were okay with David. They were okay with having David around. They even gave David a place to stay, a place where he could rule and reign and get stronger. And then they even said to David, hey, do us a favor, will you? Come, if I go against Saul and supposedly the armies of God, even though God had left, will you come with me? The king wanted to know. David was like, of course I will. Of course I will. So at this point of the story, when David and Achish and the Philistine army is heading towards Saul and his bunch, the commanders of the armies were like, you got to get rid of David. What are you doing? This guy, he could turn on us when we're in the heat of battle. He could turn on us and he could kill us just to get favor with his old boss. Isn't that interesting? It's funny. So the king said to David, you got to go, man. I'm sorry. So David takes his men, they go back to Ziklag. That was their home. That was his place. That's where he was. They had family there. And guess what happened? The Amalekites attacked. Another enemy, right? Another enemy of God's people. They attacked and they burned Ziklag down. The place was burnt down. Now, why is this important? Why is this significant to me? Because I see Ziklag as the place that we're at right now. And right now, you're going to see that religious system, that beast system. The religious system is going to be taken down the way we know it. There's going to be an attack on it. We've already seen the attack, right? We saw everything that's being revealed with the Catholic Church. Well, now we're seeing everything that's being revealed with the political system. We're seeing everything, all the corruption. There is an attack going on right now that's going to rip the throne of Saul away from him, so that it can be given back to David, King David. But that's not going to happen overnight. And what ends up happening at this point in the story is that David goes back to Ziklag with his men, and everything's burned to the ground. And they wept and they mourned and they were bummed because they were like, oh, Lord, come on. David went and prayed and said, hey, should we follow after the Amalekites? Should we go after this raiding party? And God's like, go do it. And they did. And guess what? They got everything back. They didn't lose nothing, and they actually got more. My point in telling all of you this, in the days ahead, it's going to probably get very spooky, and you may even experience a lot of great loss. But just like when David came back from Ziklag, after everything David had endured, he knew in his heart that God had a purpose and a plan for him, just like I know in my heart God has a purpose and a plan for me. I've seen my subscribers burn many a time, right? I've seen my place of influence burn many a time. Like Joseph, I've been given and it's been taken away. And every single time I'm humbled and I come to know God in a more intimate way. And I think that's what's coming. I think that the fact that Ziklag was discovered, I feel like that's sort of symbolic for all of us right now. And it was discovered in ruins. So now's the time for us. Now's the time for us, because like David, it's time for us to go after that raiding party. It's time for us to reclaim what is ours in the name of God. It's time for us to prepare for our inheritance, because it wasn't long after this whole drama played out in Ziklag that David was anointed king over all Israel. And the throne of David, God says it will reign forevermore. So it's meant to be restored. And I hope that it has been restored in the lives of each and every one of you. And I hope that you do seek the truth no matter what the cost, and that you do look at the things that are going on and you take them as positive signs that you're on the right track. Even if you come back after being burned a couple of times and you see that everything was burned down again, you know a better day is waiting. A new day. Those that seek the kingdom of God, everything is added on to them. All things are working together for the good of those who love the Lord. So when we see that the census is going on, we understand they may be coming after it. But guess what happens? Those that are chosen of God, those 144,000, the Christ in yous of the world, where Christ is ruling and reigning, those go on to inherit a kingdom. And the only way to do that is to seek it to begin with. I love each and every one of you. I hope you do subscribe, share it around, tell your friends, and have the best day ever. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.